So, we've got a series of videos coming out, more like an online clinic, I guess you could even call it, about the circus pole, single pillar. There's a million different names for it. How it works, why it works, and we go into real extreme detail about it. And I hope everybody enjoys it. But I wanted to take a second here and just talk about how I got started using it and why. So probably 12 years ago, I would think, I was sitting on the top rail of the round pen that Billy Arthur was riding a young horse in, and Billy's one of my heroes in horsemanship. I just like the way he does things, and I've learned a lot from him over the years. And he was always gracious enough to let me sit and watch him, and a lot of times we didn't even really talk, but I just watched what he did. And one day in particular, I was quizzing him about 900 things, and I asked him about the circus pole, and he said, yeah, he says, it works really good, but he says, I never really got along with it. I wasn't patient enough. And so he said, if you really want to know how that circus pole works, get a hold of Jim Paul. He said, that's how Jim made all those horses that made him famous. And he said, Jim can take that thing and he can make a dink good. So call Jim Paul. So I called Jim Paul. I didn't know Jim Paul. Jim Paul didn't know me. I knew who he was, obviously. And he was gracious enough to spend about 45 minutes on the phone explaining to me how it all worked and kind of just the basics of it, kind of the 101 version. And he said, call back if you have any questions. And that was about 12 years ago. It wasn't until 2 or 3 years ago that I finally got a chance to meet Jim in person, and told him about that. And he didn't remember the conversation or anything like that. And he's hilarious. He said, what, was I drinking? And he doesn't drink, which is the funny part. So anyway, long story short, after I talked to Jim, I sunk a post in the ground. I had a really nice colt that was by a horse called Laney Doc. He was a good son of a gun, Uncle Cracker. And so I put Uncle Cracker around the post there. And I spent like a week fiddling around with it. And I went, yep, I'm not patient enough for this either. I can see the good points in it, but this is something I'm gonna have to be older to do. And time goes by, and I got older, and I was riding a set of really hard to get along with horses. And one day I just wasn't feeling it. I just didn't want to ride them. And I had a circus pole there that I'd never used at that place, and I thought, well, if I put them around that thing, at least they won't have a day ahead of me. And I got to using it, and by then I'd matured enough and learned enough more that I saw things were happening so much faster and happening so much better than I was able to see the first time I tried it. And I started to kind of indoctrinate it into my program, a little at a time, a little here, a little there. I was usually going to it when I had a problem, rather than starting out with it to keep from having a problem. Over the course of years, eventually it became, it's the flagship of my program. That's where everything starts. Anytime I have a problem, I go to that. Anytime, anything. Rehabilitating horses, getting older horses back in shape, like everything I do really revolves around that post. And it's catching on to where other trainers call me and say, hey, if I bring a colt over, would you put it around that post for a week or so? I'm having a tough time picking up the right lead or whatever. Yeah, sure. So I get a lot done with it, and hopefully in these videos that we've got put together, you'll be able to see how it works. And it's so absurdly simple that it's hard to believe that it works, but it works so well. So click on over to the Patreon page and look up these videos, these online clinics we've got put together, and hopefully you can get a lot out of it.